Hey, my name's Al, and as you are probably aware, Stranger Things Season 4 just came out on Friday. I decided to do another Zbrush versus Blender side-by-side sculpt, and this time, it's a Demogorgon. If you're new here, here's a quick rundown. On the left-hand side, you will see me sculpting in Zbrush, and on the right, you'll have another artist. This is Spence from Blank Face Studios, sculpting in Blender. Keep in mind, these videos are just for fun. It's not necessarily a one is better than the other. It's more of how did this Blender artist tackle this issue, and how did a Zbrush artist tackle the same issue. It's all for fun, but be sure to check out Blank Face Studios in the description below. So in Zbrush, I started out using Z-Spheres. If you're unfamiliar with Z-Spheres, essentially in Zbrush it just allows you to block out the primary forms like super quickly. So in Blender there's actually a paid add-on called NBeeSCULPT that essentially does the same thing. So inside of Blender, Spence uses the old-fashioned approach, just a sphere. So with Dyn Topo turned on, Spence starts by pushing and pulling using the snake hook, the grab brush, push and pull the head, neck, and petals to his liking. So this phase of sculpting, I feel like a lot of new sculptors, they rush. They want to jump into those juicy details, and I get it. I get the urge to do that, but this is arguably the most important stage in a sculpt. Nailing down those primary forms, everything else follows. No amount of detail is going to fix your sculpt if your primary forms suck. So don't rush it. In Blender, Spence is using Draw Sharp, the crease brush, and inflate to bring those petals to life. So in ZBrush, I took a different approach. I sculpted one petal and then duplicated this around. That gives me, in my opinion, ultimate control. If I put the petals in a position that I don't like, I can grab those subtools, move them, and then it's not going to screw up the rest of the sculpt. For the torso in ZBrush, I'm using Sculptris Pro, and the primary brushes that I'm using are Clay Buildup, Am Standard, and the Move Topological brush. Eventually, you'll see Spence inside of Blender set up lights and do some awesome texture work. So instead of lighting, I just decided to do more sculpting. In my sculpt in ZBrush, there's going to be more to it, as in like more of the torso down to the abdomen and obviously arms. Here's a little side note. It's super important at the beginning of your sculpt to gather all of the reference that you're going to need. So I know it seems obvious, but I didn't do this in this sculpt. I actually gathered some reference from some fan art, and it was really great artwork, but that fan art kind of strayed away from the original concept of a Demogorgon. I was thinking like, wait a second, why does this look a little strange? It looked pretty close to the fan art. Then I looked up stills from Stranger Things, and I could tell, oh shoot. I stopped sculpting, spent about 30 minutes collecting quote unquote good reference directly from the show, directly from the sculpts that they did for Stranger Things, and then I just adjusted my sculpt from there. I really wanted it to capture the true essence of the Demogorgon. Even the best of us can rush to go ahead and get started, but collecting reference is super important. So in Blender, a single tooth was modeled by Spence and then duplicated around and rotated. In ZBrush, however, you'll see that I have a custom tooth already sculpted, and I can use the Insert Mesh brush just to drag and drop those teeth wherever I need it. There's actually a free add-on by J&M, great YouTube channel, but it's called JSculpt, and they have some features that would mimic Insert Mesh brush. So inside of Blender, Spence does something interesting for the rest of the teeth. Now, presumably there's dozens and dozens and dozens of teeth. So what Spence did was he took some of those and then scattered them using Blender's particle system, very akin to the donut tutorial where you scatter sprinkles along. He did that with the teeth. So I thought that was a smart way to work. Inside of ZBrush, this would be comparable to using nanomesh to just scatter those around and, speed up your workflow. So I chose to place all of the teeth in my sculpt by hand, but I can be very intentional on the placement of each tooth by doing it this way. If you like this sculpt, on the left inside of ZBrush, check out my Patreon. So there you'll get access to 70 plus sculpts and then new ones added monthly like this one. So eventually inside of ZBrush, I felt that the Demogorgon was looking good, but it was just like pretty stale. I decided to do a little pose. So in ZBrush, this is super easy. I just use the masking brushes. I'm able to mask off different parts, do a very simple pose, and then I can get back to sculpting super quickly. There's nothing wrong with doing like a T-pose and then posing later, but if you're sculpting on a posed character, it's going to inform some of those decisions like, hey, which way does this muscle bend? Which way does the skin fold? So that helped inform some of those sculpting decisions later down the road. Back inside of Blender, Spence uses some alphas to get that nice detail on the skin very quickly. In ZBrush, although I probably should, I really don't use any alphas for any of my work. I did, however, use the clay buildup and change the stroke type to spray, and that gives it a very nice kind of natural feel to get some texture in there. It also feels like I have a little bit more control than just relying entirely on alphas. One thing that I did inside of ZBrush was, since I placed every tooth by hand. I also wanted to go in there with the clay buildup and inflate brush, clay buildup, and just kind of inflate the area right below the tooth, like right where it would be embedded, so to speak, in the gums. It really just cements the teeth into this character and makes them look far more realistic, in my opinion. So for the final touches inside of ZBrush, I use the damn standard 2 brush. It's super powerful and works great for creatures. But honestly, I don't consider my Demogorgon to be finished. Like, I barely even touch the back. If I want to do arms, legs, things like that, but still, I probably should go back through this sculpt, do another finer detail pass, and call it a day. Spence did an amazing job with this sculpt. If you liked what you saw, please check out Blank Face Studios down in the description below.